censkai.
You know, I prepared myself for this review. I played this game previously, albeit about more than 10 years ago, but still, you'd think I'd be used to it by now. But no, after being disappointed with Sonic Shuffle and Sonic Forces, I then had to pick another game that just kicks my self-loathing down into my personal bucket of despair. Regardless of my apparent masochism, however, I still think about this game every now and then. And I just don't understand why. But for some reason, this little oddity on the Wii left an impact on me as a person. And I would be beside myself if I didn't talk about it in some way.
First of all, I should mention the publisher of this game is Xseed Games, who have released some of my favorite Japanese titles over to the West. The development of Fragile Dreams was a joint effort from both Namco Bandai Games and Tri-Crescendo. That's a lot of good to hear when you're a budding anime enthusiast like I was in 2010. Namco Bandai had the license to many big-name animes, and still do, such as Naruto and Dragon Ball, and had developed quite a number of successful titles utilizing these properties. Backing them up was Tri-Crescendo, who had previously made the stunning soundtracks for the Tales series of games, Eternal Sonata, and one of my personal favorites, Radiata Stories.
But, to be honest with you guys, I didn't pick this game up all those years ago for any of those reasons. Honestly, I picked it up simply because it looked different than anything else on the Wii shelf at the time. And when you consider that games looked like this on the shelves, I think you can understand why I picked it out. Ugh. But, you know, enough talk. Let's just get the game set up and let's get going.
We start our journey with a short monologue from our main character who is burying an old man that he had been living with, filled with regret that he did not get to know him very well while he was still alive. It's here that we start the tutorial, learning the basics of the game by exploring the observatory that our main character and his elderly caretaker called home. This is a surprisingly effective opening. Everything we do here gives us a good idea of the state of the world we exist in. The decrepit objects tell us that the world is in a slow state of decay, and even the musings of our main character not understanding modern appliances lends the idea that this has been happening for some time. I also really enjoy how this previously established home, where our main character had nothing but good memories with his guardian, has now transformed into this dark and almost unknown place to him, driving home the solitude he now feels. This is a great opening. It sets up the pace and the tone of the adventure that we can expect to have, investing the player early into the journey.
So how are they going to mess it up?
Well, let's have a supernatural being come in and make note of all the things that we've already learned through the minimal dialogue and profound imagery, and then have our main character beat him away with a stick that he found on the ground while looking around. That rhymed. Not that I didn't expect that it might take this turn at some point, but it just ruins the atmosphere they already set up in this tutorial. I mean, you could have just been more subtle with the supernatural element, guys. Have weird things happen around him so that we question whether there's an actual unseen power at work here, or if our main character is creating these beings as a coping mechanism for fear of being alone. That would make our main character so much more interesting, and constantly making the player guess what's real and what's not. Introducing this element early on only leads us to assume the ghosts are bad and caused everything bad. And where's the fun in that? Also, how much of a threat can they be when they're easily defeated by a stick? Now I know why the old man didn't tell our main character about these things before. He probably didn't think they were much of a threat when all they had to do was keep a fragile piece of wood around.
Wait, the silver-haired girl's name's in the book?
Fool. Your existence amounts to nothing more than a goldfish.
So after that lame encounter, we read a note left by the old man. Not only are we finally told the main character's name, Seto, but to the game's credit, there is a good amount of emotion being portrayed here. You feel the strong connection that existed between Seto and the old man, and after Seto accepts the old man's parting inheritance, he finally leaves his home to find other people to be with. We are then treated to a lovely opening AMV that gives us a good idea of the world surrounding our main characters. The song here is very touching, and the intermittent scenes of the two characters' actions give us a lot of pretense to the world, while also providing a montage of what Seto has been up to, leading him to where he is now. Yep, she's dead. You fall down and hit your head like that, you're dead. You're not convincing me otherwise. Grab your stick, Seto. You might have to fight off her spirit from this world.
You touched me.
I was just making sure you were still alive.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He was just checking on you.
I touched her.
Oh, good, great, get out of there, don't look back, save yourself. Of course Setos follows, and it's here in this abandoned train station that we hear a distant voice in peril. Following it leads to a personal frame. And what's a personal frame, you ask?
An interactive digital assistant equipped to respond to my user's emotional state.
It's that. Personal frame, or PF for short, is here to navigate us through this dangerous area. First, she helps by leading us to a much more durable weapon than our old trusty stick. Then she gives us some tips about combat against our ghostly adversaries. And this is where our flashlight comes into play, using it to uncover ghosts in order to weaken them. Alright, I'm pumped. I've got my bamboo sword, I got my flashlight, and I've got my sentient backpack whose expectations I am inexplicably trying to fulfill. Let's do this!
Yeah, I'm sure you can tell, but the combat just isn't that great.
Herein lies my biggest issue with Fragile Dreams. The combat. Combat boils down to shining your flashlight on the enemies and then wailing on them with whatever weapon you have available. They try to add a little variety with different weapon types and even different timing combos for some weapons, but it doesn't really alleviate the overall clunkiness of the combat system. First of all, the camera is completely controlled by the flashlight. So that means awkwardly pointing towards an enemy, attacking until you defeat it, and then awkwardly shuffling around to the next enemy you need to defeat. This is especially horrid when you're fighting in cramped rooms, since the camera will get caught on edges of whatever is in the way. All of this happens while you fight the same enemies over and over again, and they never change attack patterns while you smash away at your A button to perform the same combos over and over again. These all come together to create a burning dumpster fire of problems that could have been made better with just 2 changes. Take away the reset button and make it lock onto enemies. This would engage the player by managing focus on multiple enemies and by giving the whole new range of motion to Seto by being able to move to the side. I mean, he can move to the side, but it's not very effective for evading attacks, and it feels a bit too floaty. Also, add a dodge button. Being able to sidestep or backstep would make combat a little more fluid and energetic.
Or how about an even better solution to all of that? Just take out the combat altogether.
Oh yeah, now we're getting to the nitty gritty here. It is my personal belief that this game could have found success in being a non-combat stealth-focused title. Instead of lifelessly plodding around and swinging sticks at ghosts, we could instead take cover behind rubble, sneak around enemies, perhaps even use found items to create distractions. It would also give the devs a better excuse to show off the environment, since studying them and finding the most optimal way around hazards and enemies would make them much more memorable. It would also be a good way to build tension in encountering enemies. Not once in my time playing did I ever look at an enemy as more than just an annoyance or a hassle. However, take away the ability to defend yourself, and all of a sudden, these adversaries become more threatening.
Now, there will be a few of you out there who have played this game before and know a bit about the development behind it, that being that one of the major focuses of the game was the use of the Wii Remote as a flashlight. And you're probably asking me the same question, how would I implement that into my version of the game? Well, easy.
Let it do all the same things it already does, except now it can stun enemies, giving Seto a chance to escape in case you make a mistake in being stealthy. And this can be easily balanced too just by adding a resource like flashlight batteries into the game, making it a precarious balance of managing your flashlight's power source while also exploring, tiptoeing around enemies, and finding more items to aid in furthering Seto's goals.
All in all, if we lived in a perfect world, I think this would make the game better. But we don't live in a perfect world, and I'm stuck reviewing it in the state that it's in, so joy!
Alright, back to the actual game. With PF in tow, we make our way further into the abandoned train station. PF also teaches us about saving at campfires, and this is where we manage our current inventory and look at items found in the overworld when using our flashlight. These items are probably the most interesting part of the game, since some of them can unlock memories, which are stories from before the current state of the world, and they're fully voiced. Some of them can be really poignant, since there are a lot of talented voice actors really trying here, but even their talents can't save them from the writing sometimes.
I licked them too. They were salty.
We can also purchase items from this chicken merchant guy. I don't know, but he just kind of shows up, sells you stuff, and so that's cool, I guess. With tutorials out of the way, we find a shutter key and find our way back outside. In order to find the silver-haired girl, we make our way to the storehouse where we need another key. In the storehouse, we encounter the ghost of a little girl, who will only give us the key if we beat her at hide and seek. This leads us to another mechanic of the game, using the Wii Remote speaker to locate distant sounds. While we did use it earlier to originally locate PF, and you can use it to hear enemies, it's here that it becomes more useful, allowing us to sneak up on the ghost girl while she's invisible.
This mechanic works pretty good for the few times that it's used in the game, but it doesn't really amount to much because you can just turn it off and let the game's positional audio do it for you instead. But points to developers for using a mechanic cleverly.
Too bad for the little girl that I am a hide and seek champion. That's why nobody can find me for months at a time. Finishing hide and seek finally lets the little girl move on in peace with the help of her mother in a pretty well done emotional scene. We get the key and head back, where we have to deal with cracked floors, puzzles that involve breaking open boxes, and long confusing halls filled with annoying enemies. Finally, we reach the end where...
Warning. Battery low.
Wait, what? No. Look. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. Look, I've got plenty of batteries. Look, I got so many. Please don't go. Look.
Battery has been depleted.
Yes, you're seeing this right. PF dies. Well, dies in a metaphorical sense since she just runs out of power. The scene is well done and honestly had me tearing up a bit on my first playthrough. Even though we weren't with PF for very long, they did a good job of making her presence well known and memorable. Although it still gets awkward when Seto just shakes her after asking for his name.
And your name? I never asked you what your name is. Thank you.
Yeah, that helped a whole lot. Thanks, Seto. Seto then buries our friend and monologues about his time with her. And here lies another one of my main issues with the game. After every chapter, we receive one of these monologue scenes where Seto describes his experience of what happened as a flashback. My question, though, is why? I get the idea that he's supposed to show how he developed from these experiences while reflecting on them from the future, but here's my two big problems with that. Number one, why does the game feel it necessary to tell us what already happened? We experienced all of these events. There's no reason to re-explain it to us, the audience, again. Number two, they use these scenes to show the lessons that Seto has learned. Okay, cool, but how about instead of knocking us over the head with these lessons, create future scenarios or scenes that allow us to see these changes in actions because, spoiler, Seto never really displays any growth throughout the course of the story. He remains our creepy, awkward, wonder-bred, bland protagonist the whole time, making these memory segments seem worthless. Considering that he is talking from the future, we can see how he slowly transforms into this melancholic dreamer who remains fixated on his past, which would be a stark, interesting change considering how he's portrayed as the open-eyed, innocent adventurer that we're supposed to identify with. But all these scenes tell me is that they couldn't tell an emotionally effective story through the gameplay or cutscenes, and instead needed to rely on these flashback scenes to tell us how we're supposed to feel. Seto continues on his journey and we come across an abandoned fairground where we run into a police officer from Devil Survivor. This is Crow. Crow is a bit obnoxious, but I can't lie when I say that I actually enjoy his character, considering that he doesn't really fall into the same melancholic pit that every other character does. I enjoy that he drums along to his own beat, making him unique and memorable. What I don't enjoy is everything we have to do in this fairground. Crow ends up stealing Seto's locket, which contains all the mementos he has collected. Okay, jerk move there, Crow. You should know better than take other people's belongings since, you know, you're an officer of the law, huh?
Okay, look, don't look at me like that. How many times will I ever get the chance to reference a Shin Megami Tensei game like that? I'll tell you the answer, rarely ever.
So now we have to look around for clues in order to catch him. He gives us the runaround by placing derogatory notes everywhere before we finally catch him at the merry-go-round. Here, all we have to do is just run around and hit the A button to catch him. Once we do though, he pulls another jerk move and doesn't give us a locket, causing us to chase him into the grassy area. If things couldn't get any more annoying, now we have to hide in these teacups in order to lure Crow over. But
Come on!
it
You sure give up easily.
won't
Man, you're dumb.
work
Oh, man.
most of the
Seriously lost
time.
me again?
And he just keeps taunting me. But eventually I get it to work and make the catch again, only for him to once again run off and just pad out the game even more. The next area is this dark roller coaster, and it is riddled with good atmosphere and actually succeeds at making me feel uncomfortable and lonely. The dark and clouded background coupled with the twisting path of the roller coaster creates this really unique scene and sets it apart from most of everything we've done in the game so far. Too bad that the gameplay has to rear its ugly head again.
Why does that always have to show up?
Birds just keep constantly pelting us and we keep falling off. After we get off this roller coaster of frustrating bird encounters, Seto falls down a hole and finds hellhounds. Ah!
Seto, get out of there! Abort! You are not trained for this. I repeat, you... Oh, well, actually, never mind. It wasn't as much of a threat as I thought it would be.
We also find a pirate story that sounds similar to all the things that Crow has been saying to Seto, leading to the credence of Crow being inspired by the book. We get out, catch up to Crow, and then boss time. It's pretty lackluster, like most combat encounters. Crow apologizes, and Seto forgives him because I think we've covered how Seto is a hollow shell of an actual emotional human and should still be rightly pissed off, but I digress. Crow and Seto make up and become friends, and then...
Well, thank you.
I get that Crow doesn't understand relationships and is trying to learn how to make friends, but what an odd decision to go with. Did the developers put this in to show emotion and love isn't restricted in gender? Is that the lesson Seto learns? If so, that's a great lesson to learn, whether intentional or not. But wait, was there a kiss in the pirate story? Or did he read a different book that told him to kiss his friends? But then, what book was he reading? Okay, you know what? Not important. Seto and Crow part ways, and then we come across an abandoned hotel.
Okay, look. Up to this point, I've had a lot of complaints about the pacing of the game, especially the combat. But you see, here in this hotel, everything gets much, much worse.
And I mean it. First of all, the hotel is not that visually distinct or interesting. Also, it's a very small area with a lot of same looking rooms. The only thing of importance here is that we meet Sai, a ghost. She decides to follow us because she's bored, but she can give us hints through the Wiimote if we need any help. With her in tow, we come across this spirit who refuses to let us pass. In order to go further, we have to get a star for her. Is it in the hotel then? You may be wondering to yourself. My naive viewer, of course it isn't. It's back at the station mall we've already been to.
So do you know what that means? Backtracking!
Yes, this is pointless fluff. Just mindless padding to add more artificial content to the game. It wouldn't be so bad if there was some more variety to what we see. The most we really get here is a new tool called the special flashlight and a few new rooms. Everything else though is just a sad retreading with little direction on where to go, so I end up just checking out all the old stuff I already went through and wasting my time. I eventually find the star and head back through the gratefully added shortcut to the hotel. I give the star back and...
The moon. Can you bring me the moon? I've seen it in the park lots of times.
Okay, fine. We head back to the fairground and find the stupid moon. We head back, give it to the girl.
My ring. Could you get back the ring I lost? She'll just pull this all over again. Let's forget about it. I think it was in the hotel restaurant.
Oh, that's not too bad then, I guess. We fight a boss that's a living tree and we get her ring back. And for all of this, we get a pretty useless cutscene of future Seto talking about what this meant to him.
Or some crap like that. Honestly, I've already talked about how much I dislike the disparity between what Seto experiences and then what he tells us he learned. But this this is the worst one. It is the worst implemented one. And the reason for that is because we could have skipped the whole thing. We could have just skipped it. We didn't need to stop for that old lady. She wasn't really stopping us from going anywhere. We left twice. And you know what? He could have learned the lesson some other way. He could have just done it sometime other way. He could have just told us that. He didn't have to do any of this. But you know what? At least we can move on with the story. You know, the whole reason we're playing the game. That story.
We make our way down to the sewer system where we encounter some futuristic tech and more spirits. This area is huge though, so at this point I just start trying to ignore enemies. They give so little when fighting them that it seems almost pointless to take part in the boring combat. We do come across the white-haired girl though, and
The boy who touched me.
that's going great. She runs off though, so we continue on to the next boss, a giant mole creature. And here they do a great job of utilizing the Wii Remote and proximity audio to guess where it's coming from. We defeat it and make our way along a giant dam. Similar to the roller coaster section, I really enjoy this part. The scope and size of the area creates this breathtaking and awesome environment. There are also only birds to be concerned about here, and they can be easily dodged while moving along so you can fully experience the environmental work of the area. Once we make it back inside, we run into the merchant again, who shows himself to be a robot caretaker to a long deceased princess, and hurriedly shuns Seto to leave the room. He does come back to apologize for his behavior and gives us a large bag, so even Stevens, I guess. We then run into Crow, who reveals himself to be an android before passing away in Seto's arms.
He died.
And here's another issue I have with the storytelling. You see, in a visual medium, like a game, there should be a firm belief that you should show things and not just tell your audience them. And here is the perfect example as to why.
Here we have a character who was pivotal to Seto's growth, who was undertaking his own arc of self-discovery. This should have been an interesting parallel to Seto's journey. However, we are shown none of this journey and are only really told his discovery in his final moments. It would have been much more effective for us to see Crow discover this information, to see Seto attempt to calm him down, and to see how Crow fell to ruin later. This would have deepened that bond for Seto and invested the player. As it is though, it feels flat, almost a small footnote only placed in to make sure that Crow was accounted for before the end of the game. And that's really sad, because Crow really was the most interesting character in the game. And this is definitely a disservice to the game story as a whole, which just sucks. Crow's body mysteriously disappears, and we come across a radio where Seto finds out other humans are there, they exist. With a renewed sense of purpose, we head out to save the girl with silver hair by putting the smack down on some construction equipment and getting the key to her cage. We head back down, but our way becomes blocked. At least this gives us a chance to learn about the main antagonist, a man named Shin.
There was a brilliant scientist. People could have connected with each other using that power. There were wars at that time. We wouldn't have to use words to understand one another, to try and trigger the latent empathy faculty in people's heads. That's how they all died.
What?
Okay, that was a joke. It's actually not that difficult to understand, so let me break it down. A group of scientists created a project named the Glass Cage Project in order to have humans be able to empathize with each other. Essentially, this was to allow humans to understand everyone's feelings without having to express them using words. However, when they activated the project, everyone fell asleep. Forever. Sai was the original catalyst of the project and was romantically linked to Shin, who was one of the researchers of the project. It would seem that Shin wants to activate the glass cage again with the silver-haired girl as the new catalyst, which would cause any remaining humans to be wiped out. It's at the end of Sai's explanation that we are finally saved by a stray cat, who leads us to an exit out of the rubble. It's here that we encounter Shin, who refuses to listen to Sai and then, well...
This is where I artificially inflated the game's difficulty for myself.
So I mentioned earlier that I was skipping combat because, well, boring. Because of this though, I wasn't leveling up, so my damage and my health started falling off. This particular area, however, has very narrow hallways filled with tough enemies that take up the whole hallway, and I died so many times. I eventually just cheesed these encounters by using heavy weapons and knocking them all down in order to slip by them, but I never thought I would have to find creative ways to ignore the combat system of a game, but here we are. We do get some unique encounters later on that require us to run through a room filled with toxin before we die, and another room that requires us to sneak past enemies.
And trust me, I see the irony of having an entire room where we sneak past enemies instead of fighting them.
After all this, we finally reach Shin. He tells us that he wishes to unleash Glass Cage in order to end humanity since they've been held back too long by the relic of spoken language. We have a little fight that honestly was a bit tough until I figured out that you could hit these hemoglobin projectiles that he shoots out, but you're only limited to attacking him at certain times, which drags his fight on quite a bit. The best tactic I could find was using a strong, one-handed weapon, since you can get all 3 hits off if you time the combo just right. I get him eventually, but then he disappears like a punk. We decide to rescue the silver-haired girl, which is going...
You touched me.
great as ever. We make our way to the top of the tower where Seto is encouraged by all the people from his journey.
Knowing you will be successful to the very end.
And because we're friends, we gotta look after each other.
Which is really heartwarming. Seto and Shin have a disagreement about the meaning of language, and then we have the same boss fight all over again. He does have a new move at least, but overall the fight is really just the same thing as last time. I do really like the song here though, and how it's not super punchy, instead opting for a more somber ambiance for the final encounter. It fits the mood of the battle really well. We learn that Shin was the first test subject of the Empathy Project, and that all thoughts and feelings of everyone around him were just jealousy and contempt. This caused him to hate all of humanity. But Sai interrupts to tell him that she always loved him, and this causes Shin to realize...
Don't you see? When it comes to the important things, I guess you just have to put them into words.
The AI mainframe is discarded, and now Glass Cage will never be able to be activated again. Sai and Shin disappear together, and we're treated to one last narration from Seto.
At the end of everything, I was truly and utterly alone.
At least we get the girl's name?
Ren.
Why is this game so depressing? Okay, so that was Fragile Dreams, Farewell, Ruins of the Moon. And how did I feel about it? Well, despite all my complaints, I still really like this game.
If there's one thing I want to compliment Fragile Dreams on, is its ability to retain a consistent tone. While the writing can be a bit awkward and there's a few pitfalls in the main plot, there are a few really effective times where it did elicit an emotion from me. I also didn't even highlight many of the extra stories in the game, and how well told and engaging they are, with no small part to the incredibly talented voice cast behind everything. This game also looks really good. Even playing it now, I still marvel at how good looking some of the environments in the game are. And the music is amazing. Tri-crescendo just has a way with their compositions, and Fragile Dreams is no exception to this. I suggest giving the soundtrack a listen to if you're just looking for some really relaxing music to pass the time.
The only thing holding the game back is the combat. But, to be fair, if you're looking for a pretty somber game with a great anime aesthetic, I highly recommend Fragile Dreams. As long as you know what you're getting yourself into with the really boring and tedious combat, there's a lot here to appreciate.
There I was. Another review finished and complete. A minute time reflected in the larger scale of my life. A lesson to be learned, but not granted by any small means. This was a chance to give back. By sharing my knowledge of this game, I continue to exist in the minds of those who see and acknowledge me, lest I'm lost to the forever marching sands of time. Like the video and subscribe. Wow, that was depressing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you taking a look at this video. I've been wanting to talk about this game for a while, so it was really fun to work on. Redoing it again, I realized how long it takes me to make these, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to put out more than one like I promised earlier. But hopefully you guys enjoy it, and if you do, You can like. If you want to see more stuff for later, hit the subscribe button. And I plan on getting a lot more content to you guys throughout the entire year. I hope you're excited for it, because I'm excited for it. So thanks for watching, and check out some other stuff while you're here.